I've been observing that people who grew up in poor backgrounds seem to wear that like a badge, and they give off vibes like children who grew up in wealthy families do not have any issues, any baggage, any troubles. After all, they went to international schools and they studied abroad, and what problems could they potentially have, right? We will be discussing that in this episode. So before we start, please get into the comments and tell me what type of background did you grow up in and what type of challenges did you face. Welcome back to another episode of Figuring It Out. This is the place where we have conversations that are going to set you up to win. Figuring It Out is a faith-based personal development channel, and I am the Chief Encouragement Officer here. My name is Aggie. It's so good to have you here. So if you haven't yet added it in the comments what type of background you grew up in, please make sure to do so. But today I wanted to shed some light on the fact that kids who grew up in wealthy backgrounds also really have some deep issues to work through. I consider myself someone who grew up in a wealthy family, and the reason for that is not so much because I know or knew my parents' net worth when I was growing up, but because my parents were really extremely generous with us. So I didn't have a sensing of lack. I was not cautious about money, cautious about budgets. I was one of those kids who you would say thought that money grew on trees. I was talking to one of my sisters recently, and we were just reminiscing about our dad's love and affection towards us, and we remembered several moments where my dad would take us into a shop and say, "Pick what you want." So you can imagine growing up like that, I didn't have a sensing for the value of money, because not once did I ever bring something to the counter that my dad said, "No, we can't afford that, take it back." So my mind was very open and relaxed when it came to money. I never knew that you have to watch it. I never knew that it runs out. I never knew all of that. So one would think, oh, that is such a nice life. How could you ever have issues and so on? So my issues started actually when I was already in primary school. At least when I look back, I see that they started when I was in primary school, because I have a big sister whom I follow that was really good with money. Don't ask me how, because we grew up in the same home, and I don't remember getting like budgeting classes or saving classes. So my inclination is to think that some people have it naturally and others don't, and I didn't have it naturally. And I remember we used to get pocket money, and my pocket money, so if I got pocket money for a week, my pocket money was already finished by Tuesday morning. And my sister on Saturday still had money from the whole week. And I was like, yo, what's up? How does she do that? Because for me, on Wednesday, I was already reaching out to my parents to say, can you please give me more money, because I've run out, and if you don't give me money, I'm going to starve, and so on and so forth. And again, no judgment, no condemnation. My parents did give me money, so I just kept doing what I did. I didn't have a sensing of boundaries when it came to money. Fast forward, I finished high school, and throughout high school, I was that kid who was always, writing my parents saying, "I've run out of money, please send me pocket money." And they did send the money, sometimes a little bit late, sometimes on time. So I just somehow managed to go through all those dependent years without necessarily really building my muscle for money boundaries. I was very good at sharing a lot of my grab. Grab is like the stuff that you pack to school, your biscuits and your snacks and all of that stuff. I was in boarding school, And I was very good at sharing because I always had more. I had a lot, and I had a generous mindset because that's how my parents had raised me. So my parents were always taking care of everyone else. We were visited more than we visited. We were the home that people came to. So I just really didn't have boundaries. But through boarding school, I started to suffer in quotation marks because emotionally I was always really hurt by kids who shared when it came to them getting a bit of my grub, but when it was time for them to share with me, they were not really open to sharing with me. And I remember this one specific incident that was very traumatizing for me, where I tried to practice saying no because I thought, I'm not saying no because I don't have, I'm saying no because you're actually not really kind and I don't want to deal with unkind people. So I said no. And these particular kids came and opened my suitcase, my grab suitcase, and they poured everything into each other. So they were basically sending me the signal that I can't say no. And secondly, they were saying, if you're not going to share your stuff with us, then you're not going to have it either. And that was very, very traumatizing. For the rest of the time that I was in that school, I just shared mainly for my own safety because I thought they were so poorly behaved that if they did that once, who knows what they're going to do the next time I said no. So my boundaries suffered a lot. And when I became an independent grown up, that's when it really hit me why sometimes growing up advantaged can actually turn out to be disadvantageous. Now, of course, the advantages by far outweigh the disadvantages, but I had to learn budgeting from scratch because my mind did not know what a budget was. My mind did not know how to say no when it came to money. I did not know anything about delayed gratification. This showed up in my weight. It showed up in the quality of friendships that I was making. I somehow attracted people that were out to get me, or maybe better put, were out to get what I had. And because I probably gave off this aura that there were no limits when it came to how generous I could be, I found myself being the person that paid for people's drinks when we went out as a group. I found myself being the person that people somehow borrowed money from and did not pay it back. I found myself running out of money more often than I wanted to because now I was a grown up, and obviously I should, by this time as a grown up, have boundaries, but I did not have the boundaries. So to the kids who grew up in poor backgrounds, I'm almost sure that you guys became so much better at budgeting and at practicing boundaries way earlier, so you did not have to suffer. I don't know, maybe you can share your opinions with me in the comments, but I don't think actually that you can really blame my experience on growing up in a wealthy family. It's more a question of, was there time to have a conversation around budgeting? Now, I have to give it to my mom because my mom set up savings accounts for us, and she really tries to teach us that we can give some away. But my dad was the complete opposite of my mom, and he was just always so generous. He was generous to us, he was generous to the neighbors, he was generous to the village, he was generous to the nation. He was just so generous. Growing up, he is still generous, but I remember as a kid watching him and just going like, sure, my dad is like the best human being ever. And I still think that. And I also believe that he wanted to teach me as a child because he was those parents that always gave books. So I had books like Rich Dad Poor Dad in my hands. But you know how books, when the student is not ready, the teacher doesn't show up. So the book is there, it's in proximity, but you're not really picking it up to read. Yeah, you're picking up your Mills and Boons and whatever else we read the detective series and all of that stuff, but you're not really picking up the book that's actually going to equip you. So for the parents that are watching me, I think that a conversation, a budgeting conversation, money allocation conversation could be very, very helpful. I have seen that, for example, Jewish parents have jars that they set up for the kids, and those jars help the kids to know how to allocate their money. So if they give the kid, for example, $10 or 10 euros or 10,000 shillings or whatever the currency is, that kid then has these 5 jars and can distribute their money. And in that way, they always save a little bit, they spend a little bit, they give a little bit, and they invest a little bit, and so on and so forth. So it's worth it to have those practical exercises with your kids so that your kids can learn to say no. And also, when a child is not taught that when a child is not told no, it might seem enjoyable in the moment. So for me, it was really fun to walk into stores and get whatever I wanted with absolutely no limits. But the fact that I had not had the practice in a safe environment to say no meant that I was not equipped to say no when it came to the kids at school. I think I didn't even tell my parents about it. I just thought, my parents have enough. If we run out, I will just call them and they'll send the driver to bring me more grabs. So in the end, my parents actually spent more money on my school upkeep because I was in a room, I think with 3 other, I was sharing my dormitory space with 3 other kids. And basically my parents were indirectly maintaining grab for 3 other kids. And emotionally, I was eating my feelings, which also meant that they were spending more because I did not know how to have the conversation, because as a child, you don't know how to have the conversation. You hope that the parent is the one who triggers it. So I was talking to one of my really good friends that has kids, and I was telling her, hey, when your kid comes back from school, say, how are you? How was school today? Did anything happen at school today that you would love to talk to me about? So that you're inviting the child into a conversation, anything happy, anything sad, anything questionable, so that the child actually has a moment to think about it, because kids are also like beings that live in the moment. If you don't give them an invitation, they forget. They live in the moment. They forgive quickly. They get over things quickly. But without that conversation, the child actually misses out on an opportunity to learn, and you as a parent, you miss out on the opportunity to teach them something. So it took me such a long time to work my way through budgets, to work my way through boundaries, to work my way through savings. And here's the thing, when you grow up with wealthy parents and you have wealthy aunties and you have wealthy uncles, everyone is somehow giving you money. I mean, how great would it be if you were able to actually put that money to good use at an early age? So it's a bit sad that you grow up around it, but you waste it because some critical conversations are not taking place. And that's the thing also, where especially if you come from an African background where we have the village raising the child, you have to pay attention to the critical conversations that you as a parent have to be the one to have. Don't assume. So because I come from a big family, I have 7 siblings or 6 siblings that are older than me. I think 6 that are older than me. So I guess my parents at some point were like, yeah, she's having conversations with Auntie X, or her big sister is teaching her this, or her big brother is teaching her this. But unfortunately, everyone was just, living their lives and happy. And, especially if you're not like screaming and saying, hey, help me, I face this situation, nobody is going to instinctively come up to the idea. Maybe now it's different because we are really in the knowledge and information age, where people are actually impulsed through podcasts and books and all of this fun stuff that is on YouTube. You are provoked to actually think about things that you ordinarily wouldn't have thought about. So again, this is not to criticize or to condemn, but it is to help us actually think outside our boxes and realize that There are advantages and there are disadvantages. The other disadvantage that wealthy kids have is that if you are wealthy, your home is always the place where people come to. Your parents are always the ones who are helping. And the disadvantage with that is that when you need help, you actually don't know how to ask for the help because you've never had to. And that's something that I struggled with, and sometimes I still struggle with that. I don't really know how to articulate my needs. I have practiced that with my husband, but beyond my husband, I sometimes really struggle because I feel like, oh, am I being a burden? Or I feel like, no, that's not how we were raised. And all those kinds of thoughts come into my mind because I wasn't raised to ask. So I think that people who grew up in less privileged backgrounds actually have certain advantages that they are not aware of. And I hope that with this episode, I'm opening your eyes to things that you can be grateful about and not just always look at it like, oh, I wish I had grown up wealthy, because it's so sad sometimes to need help and not know how to ask for it, to need someone to talk to and not know how to reach out to have that conversation. Why? Because you are wired to be the giver and you don't know how to receive. So a lot of people who grew up wealthy actually really struggle with asking for help. They can go through really painful experiences, like someone goes through a divorce and they can't ask for a hug, they can't ask for a coffee and a conversation. They don't know how to articulate it because they've always been the ones giving, and they don't know how to receive, and they don't know how to ask. And that's really, really huge. It follows you in the workplace. You don't know how to ask, you don't know how to, and so on. Okay. The advantage of growing up wealthy is that you have no limits in your brain. You somehow just know that money is going to come to you. You know that you're going to have brilliant ideas. You almost walk through life with the mentality that there are automatic doors in front of you. And that is such a gift. So even though I don't know how to ask for help, or I'm having to learn, I just have this mindset that God is going to help me, that it's going to work out, that things are going to work out. I don't know, you just carry yourself. So even when I went abroad, and I was, my first job abroad was working as a babysitter because I couldn't speak the language. I live in Germany and I needed a year and a half to learn the language. In order to get into the corporate world, I needed some time to learn the language. And during that time, I was studying and then working as a babysitter. And you know how people look at babysitters like they are less than? Because I came from a background that, you know, where my wealth mindset had been attuned, I didn't see myself as a babysitter. I saw myself as a gift to this family. I saw myself as someone who added value. I looked at them and I thought, oh, how lucky you are to actually have me talking to your kids. I mean, I have watched great television shows and I know how to play these amazing games, and I can teach your kids all kinds of things, and I can take your kids to the pool, and I can actually jump into the pool and swim with them, and I don't have any hindrances or limitations in my brain. So those are some of the things where you see and you're like, yeah, it's actually great to have certain advantages from a mindset perspective, because you're not too self-cautious. It's not such a big deal for you. And even when I was babysitting, I was like, it's just a means to an end. It's not an end state, you know. But you can imagine coming from a background where your dad walked you into a shop and said, pick what you want, and then going into a space where you're earning the salary of a babysitter, and you're thinking, how am I going to make it through the month, you know? So these are the moments that really make you sit down and think. But on the other hand, because I had such a carefree spirit when I was taking care of the kids, I got bonuses, I got tips from the parents. So it was like, the kids are so happy, here's an extra birthday present for you, here is an Easter present for you, here is, I don't know, a bonus for you, and so on and so forth. So that relaxed mindset that just believes that money is going to come to you is so important. And I don't know what kinds of mindsets you guys have. Please tell me in the comments where you feel like your background has given you a healthy mindset or an unhealthy mindset when it comes to money, or where you feel like your background has enabled you to engage with people more easily, do let me know in the comments so that we can learn from each other. Now, my biggest concern, I don't know if it is like that where you live, but here in Germany, for example, there is a trend towards gated communities where homogeneous groups, people who have the same income bracket, have a secluded space where they live. And I find that really sad, because I think that it's very important for people from different backgrounds, whether it's culturally or financially. I find it's important that these people come together, because there's so much that we can all learn from each other. There's so much that we can teach each other. The conversations where we pick information back and forth from each other is so those conversations are so important. That exchange is so important. I'm very, very, very blessed that I grew up during a time when I think that humans were still more switched on. We didn't have phones, mobile phones, we didn't have social media and so on and so forth, and people were more present. So even though we were wealthy, my parents were so respectful that we grew up with these values as well. So for me, my biggest struggle was the budgeting aspect, that assumption that, that money is just going to always be there and always flow. That has been my greatest struggle. But in terms of generosity, in terms of kindness, in terms of respect, I got one of probably the best examples. But that is changing, parents that earn a lot of money right now, a lot of them are absent parents, and so their kids are growing up with all types of video games and social media and so on and so forth. So that interpersonality, that interconnection, that those social skills, that ability to conversate, the ability to ask for help, the ability to ask great questions, the ability to listen and actively listen and engage and actually genuinely care about each other, that ability is at risk. How people talk about, for example, fires in Australia, and then they say, the koala population, the koala bear population is being threatened and some animals are going extinct. So for example, in Africa, you'll hear people say that the population of elephants and rhinoceroses is going down. I'm telling you that this skill, the skill to love, the skill to care, the skill to see each other, encourage each other, deeply care about each other, that skill is really at risk, because we have absent parents and we have kids who are raising themselves. Because people might say, yeah, but there's a house help. No, the house help does not really have power over the kids that are being raised today in the format in which they are being raised. They will boss the house helps around, they will act disrespectful, and they will stretch that even to the teachers and so on and so forth. So we really have to think about very intentional ways in which we can teach not only budgeting skills and how to respect money, but also how we can teach boundaries, how we can teach social skills, how we can teach things like apologizing, being honest, being respectful, and also managing one's own emotions. Because when you're used to just getting your way, that day someone says no to you, you don't know how to deal with it. And so you might find yourself binge eating, or because you don't know, your body goes into some state of shock and you don't know what to do with it. So please engage with me in the comments and tell me how your upbringing has affected how you deal with your emotions. Are you scared to ask for what you need because you grew up being told no all the time? We can't afford that. So you find yourself compromising even on the type of husband that you choose, or the type of job that you apply for, the type of shops that you walk into, because in your mind, you're probably still fighting that narrative that, is tying you down. Or you are overprivileged and you always got a yes. And now when someone says no to you, you find yourself actually taking things personal that don't need to be taken personal. And you think that it's because of you. You think that person is saying no to you because they don't like you, or because you are just not used to a boundary. Talk to me in the comments and let me know. So to the kids that were raised in poor backgrounds, and you now have become rich, and you're trying to save your kids from the experience that you had. I hope this episode makes you sit down and give it some deeper thought, and that you strike a balance, because there are good things about being rich and there are good things about being not so rich. I don't think that there's something good about poverty, but there are good things about not being too materialistic. There are good things that can be taken from both sides, so that we can maintain that fabric that actually holds us together as society. So please engage with me. Make sure to share this episode. Let your friends and family watch it, and let's have a rich conversation about this. I think it's a critical one to have, especially also as we practice our faith, as we work out our personal development muscle and do the work to get better. I think we can be propelled by our future, but look back in our past and say, what do I need to pick and what do I need to drop? And then look at the environment around you and say, what can I learn from the person who is actually really different from me, right? If you grew up wealthy, what can you learn from someone who grew up less wealthy? If you're Black, what can you learn from your Caucasian friends, and so on and so forth? If you're single, what can you learn from the married? And if you're married, what can you learn from the single? And the learning should just never stop, because there are advantages and disadvantages to everything, or how can I say, opportunities and challenges to everything, and we should never stop learning from each other. I'll leave it at this, and I look forward to you guys continuing the conversation with me in the comments. Thank you so much for your time, and I will catch you on the next one.